Hi everyone, welcome back to the Communication and Conflict channel, promoting mindful communication, growth through conflict. Today we're going to look at how open questions help in communication and conflict resolution, and why closed questions don't help and can even make things worse. So, open questions. As a mediator and a conflict coach, I use open questions frequently for the following reasons. Open questions help increase understanding of other people's viewpoints. They help self-reflection and self-awareness. They help people to be creative. And these are all useful and important parts of what makes mediation and conflict coaching useful processes in helping people to resolve their conflict. Open questions don't give fixes to a problem, they open up understanding of oneself, of another person or persons, and understanding of the situation that's causing difficulty. And they support creativity in responding to difficult situations in a new and different way when people have become stuck in a repeated cycle of reactions that don't work. The point is, with open questions, the questioner isn't the fixer of the problem. Open questions carry no fixes within them. They help open up the conversation, support self-understanding and understanding of others, and they support or facilitate the creativity of those involved to create a better way forward. But you don't have to be a mediator or conflict coach to use open questions. When used in difficult situations, such as challenging conversations, they help us to hear about and see a different perspective, that of the other person or persons that we have a difficulty with or we want to have a conversation with. They help us to understand their point of view without feeling we have to agree with their view. The use of open questions also makes it much less likely we will end up arguing with people by battling to make our view right and theirs wrong, through throwing our opinions backward and forward at each other, and more likely that we'll be able to work with them towards a useful and constructive outcome to something, even where we have big differences of opinion about things. We'll look at why this is so later on in the video, but first of all let's clarify what's meant by an open question. So an open question is one that starts with what, when, why, where, who, or how. There's a bit more to open questions than just what they start with, but again I'll go into that later, after we've looked at closed questions. So now on to closed questions and why they're less useful in communication and can even be particularly unhelpful in difficult situations such as where there's unresolved conflict. Closed questions start with phrases such as could you, would it be worth trying, have you thought of, did you? And so the answers to such questions are either yes or no. So why does this mean closed questions are not very useful? The main reason is that they come from the questioner's point of view, and so are only trying to see if others do or don't agree with it. They aren't increasing the understanding of someone else's viewpoint or reasons or thoughts or feelings about something. They only serve the purpose of seeing if the person being asked the closed question does or does not have the same thoughts, feelings, viewpoints, reasons of the questioner. And so the only perspective being used or considered when we use closed questions is that of the questioner. Closed questions are often an attempt to get people to do or see things our way, but are phrased as a question. So they can reflect our wish to control others and what they do or how they think, even if sometimes our intention is to try to help them, but we haven't realised how our closed questions are actually doing the opposite. Here's a visualization to try to explain the differences between closed and open questions in another way. Imagine looking in on a problem situation as if you're standing on the outside of a circle looking in on it. You see it from your perspective, and the person you have a disagreement with is standing somewhere else in the circle and sees the object from a different place. Let's say your conflict is over what, from where you are on the circle, looks like a green box with a yellow stripe on it from top to bottom. If you ask the closed question, Do you think we should paint over the yellow stripe? It assumes the other person sees the problem issue from the same perspective as you, and that they would think the answer is to do something that would actually only work from your perspective. Without asking them how they see the problem situation from their point of view, you've learned nothing about their perspective, and so all your ideas and solutions and thoughts and feelings about the situation assume they see it the same as you. Asking an open question, such as how do you see the problem, or what's your perspective on this, might lead to them saying they see a blue box with a red stripe running horizontally, which is obviously nothing like your perspective, and suggests what you are both looking at is a multicoloured box with different coloured stripes on. And so you've learned something that means your idea of what will improve things does not make sense to the other person, and so is of little use to them. But what has happened is that you now both know a lot more about the situation, in more detail and from different perspectives. This greater understanding has occurred by asking an open question to find out more, while the closed question that only draws upon your view or understanding of the problem did not achieve that, nor did it address the issue from the other person's point of view. Open questions help you, in a sense, to move round the perception circle of a problem and see other views. Closed questions keep you stuck where you are, so that your view is the only one you consider, and so your solutions only work for you and are unlikely to get others' cooperation. Open questions help with mutual understanding and collaboration. If you use closed questions, it's more likely to lead to a battle, as it will only reflect your perspective and feel as if you're trying to pull everyone else to your place on the circle. If the other person does the same, you can probably see why conversations that only use closed questions can easily become stuck, while the use of open questions enable a much more constructive conversation to go ahead. You may have noticed how closed questions are used a lot in the media by some TV and radio interviewers as they try to dictate the agenda of what is discussed when interviewing people such as politicians and others. This approach to interviewing doesn't really help us to understand things better, and it prevents those they interview from explaining more about what they're saying. This is one of the reasons why people being interviewed often seem to be avoiding the question, because they want to discuss more than just what the interviewer is dictating through their closed questions. It's become a game between the media and politicians, which both sides play at times, and as a consequence we all lose the opportunity to understand important issues more deeply through hearing different perspectives in greater detail. The interviewers will say, and perhaps even believe, they're putting politicians on the spot to justify their actions and policies, etc., but this would actually be more effectively achieved if they asked open questions, as it means those they interview would have to use more detailed explanations rather than brief sound bites in their responses. Next time you see a tense TV interview with a politician, ask yourself afterwards how much you actually learned about the reasons behind what they say, and how much the interviewer restricted the conversation to a yes or no response to their own agenda, which will also not be elaborated on in much detail. Often we're just left with the preconceptions we already held, rather than learned anything new, and this is one of the ways such interviews remain stuck and can often become shouting matches between those involved. So to finish off this video about how open questions help in communication and conflict resolution and why closed questions don't help, I'm going to look at some comparisons between the use of both types of question in a situation to try to further show the differences. First of all, the most common closed question people tend to ask of others who have a difficulty with someone else is, have you tried speaking to them? Because it's a closed question, the answer will be either yes or no, but there will also usually be the following: yes, but they didn't listen, or yes, but they told me to F off, or a similar answer that leaves the person and the questioner stuck, Or the answer will be no, they aren't the kind of person you can speak to, or no, they're too intimidating. And so again, the outcome is both questioner and person with the problem remains stuck. This is because the opinion or idea has come from the questioner through use of their closed question, have you tried speaking to them? Which is only exploring whether the option of speaking has or has not occurred. Nothing has been opened up. If instead the question were an open question, what communication has there been between you? It does open up the discussion to exploration of what has happened and doesn't limit the exploration to just the questioner-led agenda of speaking as found in the closed question. The person may say, none, they're not the kind of person you can deal with, or I tried speaking to them but they didn't listen. This new understanding of what has happened helps further exploration to occur based on the new information. What would you want them to know? How else could you communicate that to them? What would you want as a response? What is it about them that means you say they're not the kind of person you can deal with? What would help you to deal with the problem anyway, whether via the other person or otherwise? A wide range of follow-up, exploratory and creativity supporting questions can follow from the initial open question and its answer. Because instead of being stuck as a consequence of a closed question, a wide set of new open questions can arise once the open question approach has been started. It would be accurate to say that closed questions close down a conversation and creativity. Open questions open up a conversation and creativity. Here's another example. If you ask someone, are you okay with that? In relation to an idea or thought or intended action, you only know what you mean by okay. The other person doesn't. So even if they say yes to your question, you haven't really learned anything, as you don't know what they mean in their response. It also risks people feeling a pressure to say yes when they may actually have some reservations. If you ask the open question, how do you feel about that? Or what are your thoughts about that? It's a more inviting question to give more detail about their thoughts and feelings about the idea or intended action, and so you have more understanding of their perspective. This will help much more in knowing whether the idea is likely to work or be acceptable, and also means you're likely to have the person's cooperation in going forward, even if they don't like the idea, because you've been willing to consider their point of view about things. Another example can be, are you angry about that? Or are you frustrated, sad, happy, etc. about that? The person asked has to say yes or no to the questioner's suggested feeling. How much more enlightening it would be to ask, how do you feel about that? So that the person can say for themselves how they feel about something and not have the feeling dictated by the questioner. Here are some other examples of closed questions and their open question alternatives. Do you like that idea? What do you think about that idea? Have you thought about buying a new car? What would you like to do about it? Wouldn't it be better to travel there by car? What's the best way to travel there? Isn't it obvious? What do you see from your point of view? In all of the open question alternatives, the answers themselves are likely to lead to further open questions to help the conversation and understanding and creativity moving forward. The closed questions are far less likely to enable that. Try it out for yourself in your own conversations, and please let me know in the comments section below what happened.